piping hot, steaming hot, fresh off the presses. Insert other metaphor here. Nailed it. Double entendre. It's time for some Metaphor Refantazio hot takes, people. Strap yourselves in. Get ready. I asked you, yes, you, the audience, for your hottest, spiciest, most boiling hot takes about Atlus's latest and greatest RPG, Metaphor Refantazio. And let's get right on into it. I'm about to react to them. And starting off, we're just going to dive into the deep end, yeah? Buckle up. We have at AlexN5743 who says, hot take, the rapping monk is overrated. Alright, pitchforks down, people, pitchforks down. I mean, do I even say this next part? I mean, like, I kind of agree. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a good song, and the music's good overall. It's just when I hear that theme over and over and over and over and over again, it doesn't have the same pizzazz as it once did for me. Plus, it's also just not my style of music overall. It was never my favorite battle theme in all of, Atlus's history. I thought it was a pretty good one though, but yeah, I think overrated is the right word that I would use personally, at least to describe how I feel about it, because I don't think it's bad or anything like that, it's not this, like, S-tier battle theme for me. But the memes about it, those are S-tier. Those are absolutely not overrated. Those memes, beautiful. Okay, I'm not joking or exaggerating when I'm saying this. My door just opened on its own, so now I'm a bit fearful that the ghost of some monk of ancient past has heard what I'm talking about and decided to come and enact some kind of corporeal vengeance upon me. So if this is my last video, you all know what happened to me. And if my dying words are overrated, bleh, then so be it. Next up, we have at Zenado22 who says Metaphor combat is completely trivialized with the retry feature. Jmulls, you can't go in yet, you gotta read the rest of the take, Jmulls. You can't just go right in after the first sentence. This isn't a Twitter argument. Okay, I'll focus in. I'll hold back what I want to say. All you need to do is just reset the battle and use the Trickster's move that adds more turns until you get all 4, and then with those turns, buff your strongest party member, usually protagonist, and use single targeter AoE, almighty, until you kill the boss. And if you miss or make a mistake, just reset. Great combat system, but it just became too easy, especially on harder difficulties. And I get you don't have to use it, but when a lot of moves are luck-based with like a few of Merchant's moves, it just feels like there isn't much of a penalty, as in Persona you would just miss, lose your turn, maybe get hit or even die, and then you have to go all the way back and restart. Okay, so I completely disagree. Full stop. There's not a part of this that I agree with, in any capacity, in any regard. I'm going to try to be diplomatic. Just bear with me here. Okay, this might be a hot take of my own, but I can't freaking stand what Atlus determines to be difficult. Their idea of engaging difficulty and mine are completely different. And I think one of the reasons I really like Metaphor Refantazio and its combat overall is because it's moving away from that traditional Atlus view of difficulty, and that just being punishing instead of actually being hard, difficult, or complex. Where it's just, if you die, and you don't have this, like, wellspring of knowledge already ingrained in your psyche, you'll just lose a bunch of progress, and the game will be hyper-punishing in that regard. I despise that style of difficulty. I view it to be a whole waste of my time. We went over this back during the SMT3 playthrough, but I really like the retry feature because it doesn't waste my freaking time. For the most part, outside of the Trickster ability where you get additional turns, my opinion, I would just make it so that if that ability is the first one used in the fight, it just gives you an automatic 4, because I'm just going to restart it either way to get that. Because if this game wants to try and screw me over, I'm going to screw it over. But like outside of that, I don't want to have to replay 5, 10, 15 minutes to get back to a point where I just was because RNG wanted to screw me over. That I always just view that as a single waste of my time. I never find it fun, I never find it engaging, it's always annoying to me, and it puts me off. Having the retry feature keeps individual button presses still important and satisfying within the flow of combat, but if I want to just restart the fight and go again, I don't have to walk all the way back from Persona 3 just to get back to where I was. And it's to the point that in Metaphor, if it didn't have that retry feature, I would have viewed it to just be a straight up worse game without it. It's a feature that, in my opinion, I want to see in every Atlus game going in the future. I don't need that one trickster ability, necessarily, and there are other abilities you get late game that just give you additional turn icons. There's even like food you can get, but it's an RPG. I view that to be part of the RPG, part of the work you can put in before or in between actual fights to give yourself a benefit, to give yourself some kind of boost, because that to me is the beauty of the press turn system. They can make use of it, the enemies can make use of it to try and screw me over, but I can also do the same against the enemies. It's this really weird state I find myself in regards to Atlus, where I like the actual combat loop, and I love the story, the world, the characters, the music, all of that. I just cannot stand how they view difficulty. Their whole philosophy regarding it. It's getting better in recent entries, for me at least, but generally I view mechanics that just waste my time to be an active detriment for the most part. So if I just want to restart a fight, I have the option to do it with just a simple press of the button, and then I can go. It's not like it just resets me to the last turn or anything. It resets to the beginning of the fight, so it just cuts out that awkward chunk of like running back to a boss or whatever that to me just does nothing for the experience. Next we have at Fraldarius E, who says, Simile Refantazio would have been a better name. I mean, what else is there to say? Are they wrong, though? I would say yes. Yes, you know what? I would say Metaphor Refantazio is a better name. Simile sounds too much like smile. And we can't have happiness around here. No siree. We need sadness, we need depression, we need anger, we need fear, we need sorrow. Positive emotions. Patuh! I spit on them. I hawk-twa on them. Next up we have at, oh wow, it's that guy, 9154, who says, mechanically, Metaphor is a near-perfect execution evolution of the modern Persona formula. So P6 has to significantly shake things up and or radically reinvent the formula in a manner similar to Breath of the Wild to not be seen as a creatively safe or stale game. I do not envy the position the P Studio finds themselves in. God, I love the fact they're called the P Studio, because following up Metaphor will be a daunting challenge. I'm not over the dumb humor just in P Studio. Okay, not everyone will agree with this. I kind of do. I've talked about this before. When it comes to Metaphor Refantazio, it does pretty much everything that I wanted P6 to do already. Has, in my opinion, a more mature story and storytelling, better pacing with the overworld and the calendar management and all that, decent to better dungeon design on the whole. I prefer the press turn system over Persona's combat, personally speaking. So like coming off the back of like Persona 4, 5, 3 Reload, 3 Portable, 5 Royal, whatever, 5 Stardust Dragon, Metaphor does pretty much everything I wanted it to do. And it's a great blend between what I enjoy out of Shin Megami Tensei and what I enjoy out of Persona, and largely leaving away the stuff that I don't like. I really like the archetype system. It has the characterization, the storytelling, and overall emphasis on story that I like out of Persona, with the world building I like out of SMT, and the combat that I like out of SMT. And it reins in a lot of the actual difficulty and enemy design that I disliked from the history of Atlus. And what we get is pretty much as if you had a bunch of nerds going to a boardroom one day and say, how do we please Jmulls specifically? So of course, when a game feels like it's designed like that, I'm going to like it. And I don't want to get it twisted here. I am not pessimistic about Persona 6. I've talked about this before. When you look at Atlus and like their history of games, if you go in chronological order from release, you can tell what exactly they identified to be a problem, what they identified to be good things, based upon how they like evolve the series going from one entry to the next. I've talked about this more in detail previously. It's a really interesting thought experiment you can do to like try and get behind the lens, if you will, of Atlus's development. I think there's still a couple of weak points in Atlus's overall style that they can iron out and improve upon, dungeon design being the biggest one for me at this point. I love the pacing of Metaphor from top to bottom for the most part, the characterization, the storytelling, the actual gameplay flow. I still enjoy Persona combat, nor do I expect, and I don't expect, let me just be clear, clear, I do not expect Persona 6 to actually have the press turn system, but I love the Theurgy mechanic from Persona 3 Reload. So I expect them not only to look at Persona 5 Royal, but also Persona 3 Reload and Metaphor Refantazio and say, okay, what worked here, what didn't work, how can we make this better? And generally, in that regard, I trust Atlus's development. But there will be a bunch of people that just grow tired of like the school formula that Persona has. And Metaphor did not have that, so it's a breath of fresh air for a lot of people. And then going back to that more tried and true formula of Persona, having that anime trope of being in like a high school and all that, some people may view that to be stale, and I can understand it. For me, if the game is good enough, I'm not going to care that much. Because while I think Persona still needs to grow and evolve, and there's still some things it can iron out and improve upon, namely dungeon design, I think the problem is if you try to just change for the sake of changing, you end up compromising the core experience that is there. I don't think Atlus have gone that far yet, but a lot can happen going from one entry to the next. It's a very fine line. I'm not saying that it's easy to do, which is why I do also agree with the take that I'm not envying the P Studio here. This is a daunting challenge. This is a hard one. I have faith that they can pull it off, and I can be optimistic in this regard, because up to now, Atlus really hasn't disappointed me when it comes to game releases, of games at least that are like somewhat modern. The only game that I've played of theirs that I've actively disliked is SMT3. That game came out a long time ago, but even a game like Persona 3 Reload that I view to be highly compromised in certain areas, or deeply flawed in others, is still a game that I absolutely love and adore. So it's not like they need to put out a perfect game in my opinion. You just need to make sure that the strengths, the core identity of what makes Persona so lovable and enjoyable, that has to be working. You have to nail the story, you have to nail the characters, you have to nail good and fun combat, and these are things that I think they can do. Going back to a previous point that I made though, let's expand on it with @Carito000, who says, I feel the dungeon design was pretty mid, especially the side ones, and I'm not a big fan of how the archetypes work or how slow it feels to level them up. Okay, I kind of agree with how slow some of those archetypes can feel to level up. It does involve quite a bit of grinding, especially if you unlock certain ones that just like, you need like 5 other guys to be level 20 in the second form. Hi, Heisme. I overall quite enjoy how archetypes work. Each part of them still feels as if they have some kind of unique element to their playstyle because of the archetype they're inherently given, but it's still flexible enough to where I can like modify how they play and how they perform and what their function is. I like that. Something I do agree with is like, as I've talked about before, I think the biggest problem Atlus has in terms of gameplay is still their dungeon design. I don't know what is going on there. I don't know why they can't get this right. I think the closest to getting it right was either Persona 5 Royal and Persona 5, because I kind of view them to be about the same in this regard, and also Metaphor Refantazio, but not the side dungeons, the main ones. The main ones, for the most part, I quite like. They're still focused largely on combat and the actual gameplay, but there's some nice navigation, a couple of side activities you can do sometimes. I don't think they went hard enough in that regard personally. Decent variety of actual gameplay. I quite liked the Cadarius, whatever. The airship dungeon, I quite like that one because of how different it was. I like it when dungeons kind of twist the gameplay formula and make it feel a little bit different. The side dungeons just kind of felt like a bunch of corridors slapped together. GG, well played. They tried to do a couple of interesting things with them. I don't think they largely worked. I felt them to be very stale and repetitive, quite like Mementos. And I think for me personally, in my own ranking, the way Atlus can easily go up a tier in terms of overall game quality is just by having really fun dungeon design. That's not something that I think I've ever really had out of their games. It's been either fine or tolerable, or like actually kind of decent with Metaphor and P5. I like it when story is told in the dungeon, when it's not just a glorified like loading screen before the next cutscene for actual story at the end of the dungeon. I like it when the dungeon itself is utilized for storytelling, for character development, for furthering the themes. That's something I think P5 did quite a bit. P4 tried to do a bit. I think P5 leaned more into that style, while also having more varied gameplay as well. Metaphor tried to rein that back in a little bit and put more focus on the actual combat, which I think is kind of a good thing to some degree. I just don't like Atlus dungeon design when it just feels like a bunch of corridors slapped together with a bunch of mobs you fight. That gets really boring to me really quickly. For the next hard take of the video, we are at Javier Garcia SU5VN, who says, Luis, That's at least what I imagine that emote sounds like. Look, can we just say it's a bit of a crying shame how Louise has far and away the best outfit in the entire game and it's not remotely close? Like, we're the protagonist and our outfit is trash. It's garbage. It's terrible. I got like a cloth from a dining room table and called it a GG. Like, if the election was decided on drip alone, we would have been knocked down the first round. And everyone else as well besides Louise. The man's like one of the only characters in this game with good drip. He's also one of my favorite villains of Atlus. Don't know if I drool over him, but what a decent chap. Next up, we have a take that is kind of similar to one we did earlier in this video, but it's different enough, so I'm gonna allow it. We have @Angel of Ambrosia, who says, hot take, the music got hella tedious and was ultimately disappointing. The team made it seem like there was going to be this insane list of bombastic songs. It was like 4 of the same songs used over and over. There's a lot of songs that are repeated throughout this game, and I would say overall, I quite enjoy the soundtrack in Metaphor Refantazio. Having said that, it's not one of my favorites of Atlus. I think I like it more than the soundtracks I've heard so far in SMT, but I still enjoy those. I think in terms of overall soundtrack, I vibe more with like Persona. Those are the soundtracks I go back to listen time and time and time again. I haven't ever really gone back to listen to Metaphor soundtrack, and maybe that says something by itself. I don't think a soundtrack needs to be re-listenable or inherently catchy to be good, if that makes sense. Sometimes having a really good atmospheric soundtrack can go a long way. I don't think that's what the vibe Metaphor had, though. It was unique, though, and I'm glad they tried something different, but it's just not going to hit for everyone. Not bad by any stretch of the imagination for me, but at places, it still was really dang good. So I don't know if I would go so far as to call it disappointing, but I'm not over the moon about it either, if that makes sense. We have one final take for the video. I think this is the final one. And we have @NoReQ1W, who says, Mage Academy was handled perfectly fine and was probably always intended to be just a clash between spoilers and the party. I never understood the criticism that it was worse off not being a dungeon, but I didn't personally see a reason to go there since it was just a remote location that was abandoned in the frozen mountains. Nobody was living there anymore, and the place was remote enough to not have any monsters, so having there be a forced dungeon there doesn't really make sense to me. Studying dragons also wasn't why, spoiler, lured the party there. We had already learned the nature of dragons on Virga Island as well, so going there to learn why dragons exist would have been redundant. Speculating something relevant, the extended period of no story at the end was probably not due to an axe dungeon, but rather a response to the criticism that completing everything in a single Persona playthrough was too difficult. To me, and I quite like this simply made this portion of the game feel like the end of the RPG, go do side quests portion that's typically found in other games. The cozy part where you're getting ready for the final battles. I pretty much agree with everything said here. I know some people view these 2 sections in particular to be like the worst elements of the game. I never really felt like that. Would I have mind if there was a dungeon at the Mage Academy and they just wrote some random bullcrap to make it work? Not particularly. It's a really cool location. Get it? It's in the ice world. Well, not world, but like ice region of the world. You know what I mean? But like not having a dungeon there didn't particularly like perturb me or anything like that. I quite liked the pacing there in this weird way because it was just like non-stop action, and the pacing in Persona and Atlus games sometimes can just feel really slow. So having a section that felt just like big plot point, big plot point, big plot point, I actually quite liked that. It was a bit refreshing to me as well. It was just like this non-stop adrenaline-filled lore bomb after lore bomb after lore bomb after character moment, build up this character, big sacrifice. I quite like that. And then the period at the end of the game where they just pretty much give you 30 days, say, go have fun with it. I agree. This feels like, going back to what I was talking about before, how Atlus will go from game to game addressing criticism and what they view to be a problem, what they view to be a good thing. I talked about before how I view the calendar system in Metaphor to have really good pacing, because when I was done with the game, I only really had like golden beetles to farm, and I only had like 2 days to spare. I had done everything else that I had wanted to do. I had maxed all the followers, I had done the Colosseum, I had done the Dragon Super Bosses. I was good. So to me, this felt like really good pacing, and I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything. I didn't have this like bad feeling like, oh, I messed up my scheduling in like month 3, which had a rippling effect, so I couldn't finish the storyline I really wanted to do. Oh, this feels super bad. I didn't get that feeling here. So when I beat Metaphor Refantazio, I felt super satisfied. And I can get why some people may not get that kind of feeling from this game, but I did. So to me, I really enjoyed how they constructed this game overall. And yeah, I think with that, I'll call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, have a great day, go play some video games, leave a comment down below with your own hot take in regards to Metaphor Refantazio, and I may react to them in a future video. Also, be on the lookout. I plan to bring back my highlighted playthrough of Metaphor Refantazio. We've been doing them in shorts, but I also started a series a while back where I make full-fledged videos of my highlights of my Metaphor Refantazio playthrough, and we may be bringing that back in the next few days, so keep your eye peeled for that. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody, until we meet again.